everyone. I'm Ryan Smith, and this is ModX Network Voices. We're excited to invite you back for another session and video. I'm joined with, of course, my partner, Ivan Rupnik. Ivan, like to say hello?
Hi, Ryan.
Thanks for coming again, Ivan. And our guest today is Carol Galante. Carol directs the Terner Center for Housing Studies at Berkeley, UC Berkeley in Berkeley, California. And she's going to be answering a few questions, and just want to welcome her. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ivan.
So to start out today, I thought I'd just ask a question as an introduction, Carol, and that is, a little bit about your history with HUD, U.S. HUD, and how that led to the current establishment of the Terner Center, and what does the Terner Center do at a high level? That would be helpful.
Sure, great. Well, I can start with HUD and work backwards, but I was with the Obama administration for about 5.5 years, starting in early 2009 through the end of 2014, both as the head of multifamily and then later the Federal Housing Commissioner. So I was with HUD during, obviously the last big recession caused by the collapse of the housing markets. And so, learned a lot there in terms of government policy and its impact on markets. So we can talk, more about that. Prior to that, though, I also ran Bridge Housing Corporation here in California, which is the largest, nonprofit housing producer of affordable and mixed income housing in the state, and did that for a number of years. And before that, I was a local city planner in California. So all of that combined experience, I would say, really led me to, when I left the administration and came to Berkeley, want to do more than teach, even though I wanted to teach for sure. I wanted to do more than teach, and really wanted to use the years of being in the trenches in housing development and being at the policy level at both HUD and in local government to really try to make an impact on changing both the policy context and the practice context through research and innovation. So that's what the Terner Center does. We are, barely 5 years old, and have, I think, had some influence on both how the industry operates and how state, local, and to some degree, and more in the future, federal policy impacts how we build, how we design, how we finance housing in this country.
Great. Maybe following up on that, actually, so the Terner Center actually sounds a little familiar to some of the format we have at Northeastern through the Caucus Center, which is a sort of a proactive think tank that influences Massachusetts policy. So maybe, I guess, following up on your background, what are some of the more specific actions that you might describe programs from the Terner Center to give a sense of the kind of work that you do, and also how does that relate to your role, your really unique role at Factory OS, and how do maybe even is there overlap between those two roles?
Sure. Yes. I think it's all interrelated at the end of the day. So
Sure.
I'll just give you an example. We do research that as a Terner Center that impacts, as I said, the governmental policy context around zoning and things like that. So, for example, we were a major influence in getting the state of California to create model accessory dwelling unit zoning requirements and require every community to have a accessory dwelling unit ordinance that actually would enable accessory dwelling units to actually get built. And then that leads to work with companies for example, who want to take advantage of that opportunity that's now been opened up to build more housing. And so one of our programs at the Terner Center is something called the Housing Lab, where we have entrepreneurial, we solicit essentially through an application process, entrepreneurial companies that want to make a difference in terms of housing affordability through their companies. And two of the companies in our inaugural class were companies focused on accessory dwelling units. One in the kind of trying to take accessory dwelling units and make them from kits in a factory and then deliver them to the lot, and the other one that was more involved in how one finances accessory dwelling units. So that's just an example of how we have programs where we're taking the research and policy and relating it to actual practice. Factory OS is a good example of doing the same thing. So Factory OS, I personally got interested in Factory OS because I know the leaders, the co-founders of the company, and one of them is a longtime colleague. I actually worked for him early in my career, and he's a supporter of the Terner Center for Housing Innovation when we were first getting started. And so I was really interested in his vision of trying to change the way we build. And so I undertook doing a kind of initial study of the modular landscape in the San Francisco Bay Area, like what companies were there, how many deals were under construction using any kind of modular, who was doing it, what were the barriers and what were the opportunities. And it was my initial association with Rick Holliday at the factory that got me interested in doing that. And so that was really even before he got the factory off the ground, but once he got it off the ground, I joined their advisory board. And also they had a vision of wanting to use the space that they have at the factory to highlight innovations in modular construction, not R&D, although they do that for their own factory, but something that is more public facing, similar to the work in some ways that I think ModX is doing. And I would say we've barely scratched the surface there, given that the focus over the past year and a half, 2 years has really been about getting the factory up and running and producing. But we are doing as the Terner Center, some interesting work with the factory around modular practice and ways to improve that. And just a couple quick examples. We're doing study of the labor force. Where do they come from? What are the benefits of working in the factory, etc. And we're also doing some energy efficiency work with one of the national energy labs. So, I mean, there's other things that we're doing there, but I'd say we're just getting started.
And I also you have Factory OS has a very innovative labor practice in terms of modular. How much has your background in public policy impacted that, or how do you view that? As it seems like it's also a kind of innovation that we always talk about innovations in technology or in finance, but that side is often underrepresented in the discourse.
Yeah, so I think it's really important. It was frankly important politically. Once the factory made the decision to locate, in the San Francisco Bay Area, the union issue, let's just, be blunt, is a big one in terms of particularly if you have an emphasis on doing public projects or in this case, affordable housing development. Some of the policy really dictate or lead one as a developer to doing more union labor. And so, I think the factory made the decision that they wanted to embrace a union construct within the factory, and so they have a manufacturing union, which is a little different than the typical building trade unions. And that's one of the things we're going to be looking at in this study. But just understanding how that's working. The relationship between the factory workers and the union and the management of the factory is all quite innovative, at least in this country. We also visited factories in Sweden, as you know, Ivan, and it's not unusual there. So we also did an investigation into that at the time too.
One thing that we're really fascinated about with the Terner Center, Carol, is it follows on a model we have seen in other countries. We just use Sweden as an example, in which government, university, and industry partners to try and move housing forward, right? So that you're affecting a number of different viewpoints, but also that there might be additional sources of funding outside of industry, i.e., government might invest in it, or the university might have spin-outs. You could have your students that want to develop companies. So that partnership is really, really important, and we haven't seen it very often in the United States in particular. And so it's really it's heartening for Ivan and I to see you doing this work. It's really important work, and we think it's a key partnership in order to move innovation forward, especially in affordable housing. To another question, we're currently in a really uncertain time right now. Everyone, us three are here on the phone in our homes working, right?
Right. Right.
And so, COVID-19 and post COVID-19, we're going to see a very different housing industry, affordable housing industry. Could you comment a little bit about that and what we expect to see, what we're currently seeing, what we expect to see, and what the future might be, especially given not only your research area and your expertise, but your history in having experienced the last recession and being in also a similar role? That would be helpful.
Sure. And I will just say, I think, I really do have deja vu some days, going back to my early days at HUD, in the early days of the recession, and trying to figure out what the right policy moves are and which ones are, politically even possible. And, I see the same thing happening this time around. I will say one big difference I see is the last recession was really caused by the collapse of housing markets and some, lending behaviors that, government regulation had allowed to occur. This is clearly, an external hit to the economy and an external hit to the housing market. So it's not, it's not a problem in the housing markets. It's, a hit coming from the outside, like a hurricane. And so I think there's a lot more openness at the federal level to supporting the housing market, through supporting renters with their income needs. So income support for both homeowners and renters, that I think will really help keep the housing market, I don't want to say afloat, but stabilized in the short term. And how long the government will feel like it can continue to do that, I don't know, but I think that's an important difference that I see happening right now in a strong way. And so I think that puts the housing industry in general on a better footing than it had coming out of the last recession. My hope is that we can use some of this time, to the extent there isn't construction going on in some places as a result of shelter-in-place orders and things like that, that we can use some of this time to kind of get rid of some other regulatory barriers for construction that would be helpful, and that government will be responsive to that, setting the stage for the future. Partly because my belief is, and I've written about this, we're going to come back from this, and we're still going to need a lot of housing. And we've got to be setting the stage to ensure that we're producing that. On the construction end, I guess I just want to say, I also am trying to use my bully pulpit to be clear that, this is an opportunity to use construction technology, modular, panelization, all kinds of innovation in the construction industry moving forward, because I do think we will have ultimately less government money going into affordable housing development. And we're going to need to stretch those subsidy dollars. And the reason I say I think there's going to be less is because state and local governments, they are being really hard hit with their property tax and income tax revenues. And so they are not going to be willing, or they're not going to be able to put a lot of subsidy. And we have a situation in many parts of the country, including California, where the cost of producing an affordable housing unit is outrageous. And I think that will continue to drive us to using techniques like modular to lower the cost, and in all kinds of ways. And I think this is an opportunity to push that forward.
Maybe actually building upon also that, HUD is actually undertaking a 3-year project to look at what they're calling factory-built construction outside of the HUD code home. Do you have any advice for your former colleagues at HUD in terms of where they should spend their, not what might be a more meager federal resources? I mean, now that you've seen from both sides, is there anything that they should focus on? And they seem to be, even before this started before the pandemic, and it seems to be continuing. We're involved in different ways, but it's, there's definitely an interest and understanding that HUD wants to be more involved, particularly in offsite construction. Is there something you see as a sort of low-hanging fruit at this time?
Well, I would just say there is no low-hanging fruit in the federal government. It's all hard, administrative change is hard.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's great that they're embarked on that. I also think, they've made some progress in how they finance, using the FHA for offsite construction. I think there's a lot more work to be done there, and I think that's again, if there's low-hanging fruit, I think that would be helpful. Low-hanging fruit. So yeah, I'm glad they're doing it, and I hope they stay with it.
Thank you so much, Carol, for your time. I want to close this conversation out by just letting people know that Carol's been gracious to try and work with us, and we hope to have an event in the future once COVID-19 clears up and we can be face-to-face to hold a ModX Bay Area and be able to tour Factory OS and spend some time with Carol in the Terner Center at Berkeley. So stay tuned for that in the future. And one more time, thank you, Carol Galante, for joining ModX Voices today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you when we can.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank
Carol.
you.